complexity, and there's a certain degree of complexity in that example, certainly more so than the stupid, silly ones I like to give. But in that complexity, our awareness, until it gets really fine-tuned, it's hard to parse out what's the interiors and what's the exteriors. So let's play with it. So there's a sign saying, don't stand on the toilet. Through symbols. Words at all?
No.
Just a symbol. So it's a little guy, kind of like...
It's a guy sitting like that, and then
with the cross. This is perfect. Okay. So what are the lower right aspects of that? And the hint would be, this brings you over to a second example, which I was hinting at was going to be language and speech. So what are the lower right aspects? One of the lower right aspects of that. I walk up to the outhouse, right, and I see the sign.
Body.
Well, it's a physical toilet, right? So some part of me is registering that, and that has a use in society, which I'm aware of to some degree, or I would have just out in the woods. But in the sign itself, the little whatever it is, the material marks, the physical mark, the symbol itself is a lower right quadrant, dimension. Yeah. You can point to it. It's right there. It has a meaning. Oh, now this is interesting. This is where the complexity comes in. So it is a mark. Anyone who's not colorblind, not visually distorted, will say that is a guy like this with the X. The X is red, etc. We're not going to grapple over the reality of the sign itself. But what does probably come up is, what does the sign mean? What is the sign telling me to do or not do? Okay? And this is where it gets deeper. Again, you can just bat it back and forth, lower left and lower right. The lower left meaning of that material mark, this is getting into semiotics now, because you want to track the technical philosophy of it. It's actually an area of research of mine, so I could talk about it for like 7 hours. So stop me at some point. But the lower left meaning, or the meaning of that, is the lower left dimension. Well, what is the meaning? You know that, right? The people who encounter that, the toilet, probably most of them know that. What if you took probably half the people in the room here, wouldn't probably know it immediately? I'd have to sit there and say, I said, do you stand on the toilet? I said, okay, don't do it. And then I think like, why are they telling me not to do it? I think that's the inclination to stand on the toilet. Doesn't throw paper down, just sit down like normal. I'd stop and I'd say, culturally, it's not in my meaning sphere. Now, I'm smart enough to figure it out, read into the meaning, but it doesn't arise for me as meaning. The reason is because the lower left dimension is variable. It changes culture to culture. So, again, to flip it back from the lower left end, the meaning of the sign to the lower right is the behavioral outcome. The person who created the sign put it on the toilet because they want to stop people from doing a particular behavior. Whether or not it gets results, those results, the intended results, or other results, is a lower right arising. What the people do. In your experience, do they obey the sign? Do they not obey the sign?
Maybe you give somebody an ND.
What's that?
Maybe you give somebody an ND. Is it possible too? That's
Like that. Yeah.
Well, I think.
It's kind of hard to know, actually, because, you know, it's like we're not watching people in the toilet, and now that I'm thinking about this. Wait a second, is there like something looking in?
That also switching to what would they think from their perspective, looking at the sign. So.
Yeah. That's part of it. That's part of it. Well, that will get in more tomorrow, looking at it through their eyes. My point is, the behavioral outcomes could be variable. In this case, we don't necessarily know. But the point is, they co-arise. Sign, meaning, lower left, trying to change or modify behavior of lower right. So back to the speech again, the idea of speech in this present moment, what's arising in our lower right quadrant dimensions, is the words that I'm using and the way that I'm putting them together in sentences. And for those of you who English isn't your first language, you know, it's more challenging than if it were, because language is or has a lower right dimension. There's a material aspect to it. It's called syntax. It's the grammatical structure, the words and the paragraphs and the way that you stick them together and the way you conjugate your verbs and all that stuff. Now each one of those words and the way that they come together creates or delivers or implies a certain meaning. Right? And that meaning, again, is variable. I could say the simple technology of love, and it means one thing here, it means a different thing over here, but the words were the same. Okay? Words are the lower right. Spoken, written, doesn't matter. Sign. Words are the lower right. The meaning and its variability is the lower left. You can't see it. I don't really know what y'all take as meaning from simple technology of love. Now, if we work really hard and do this whole seminar and we keep bringing it up, and it kind of becomes like a through line for some reason, maybe at the end of the week we will resonate around a shared meaning there. But at this point, we can't take that for granted, because lower left is that slippery, if you will. There.
Is there a possibility to separate those two from the lower segment? Because there's always a physical part of the shared meaning. If the meaning is something not touchable, it has to be visible at some point in collective behavior.
So we're separating the upper from the lower, or the right from the left?
There's a line between the second person, third person, plural. It seems
So
to me it's always...
You're talking about the reality of this line.
Yeah, but so at the same time...
Yeah, what I would say there is yes, in every single case, depending on how finely tuned your awareness is, you can always find that line, always make that line. It's an epistemological, ontological, deeply philosophical question if it's, does that line exist? Okay. Totally different question. Can you always point to it, make up a line, find a line? But yeah, I would say yes. Some examples, certainly some phenomena, certainly harder than others. Does it exist? We'll have to play with that one over beers throughout the week. Get into like the deep epistemology of it, but we have to be drunk or high for that. I'm avoiding it kind of purposely. It's a very deep and difficult question about, do those sorts of separabilities in the cosmos actually exist? But yes, you can always find the line.
But all the theories built around it in ways.
I know, it's crazy, right? Look what's riding on this. The whole freaking model is built off this simple diagram. It's huge. It's a deep, deep question. I'm not going to go into it in this, because I'll let them lose like half the group and feel bad about it, deeply guilty. But circle back around. Let's talk about it. It's a fun question. We have one more back here.
Yes, so with this sign, it could also be upright, right?
It could also be what?
Yeah, and this example with this one sign, one person, could also be the upright, third person.
Oh, one sign?
Right? Yeah.
You're talking semiotically. You said sign, right?
Yeah, I mean the example with the
oh,
sign,
like the toilet. Oh,
it could be lower right, it could also be, at the same time, it's also upper right.
It depends how you want to slice it. What I would say is that if you have, again, if we're getting into semiotics, which I'm not supposed to get into, if you take a whole, like a physical, it's printed out on a piece of metal or something, right? That whole thing is a sign. That's a semiotic term to refer to like a word is a sign, or this behavior actually is a sign. It's also a sign that you put on the wall. It's a sign, and its parts, meaning it has an X, and it has a person replica and a toilet replica, right? Those would be the upper right aspects, the parts of the sign. Okay. Does that make sense? So it's about, like, we take a molecule, right? It's a collective of atoms. H2O, 2 hydrogen, is that right? Yeah. And 1 oxygen. So its parts, that'd be lower right, a molecule of water. Its parts would be the individual atoms. And you're getting into the idea of how, we create levels. It just really depends on how you slice it. I was supposed to click those.
To watch the questions go around again.
That's a diagram I created that represents a beautiful complexity of the quadrants, but truly baked in this really simple and elegant model. That again, if we train your awareness, we can point to it. Right now and right now and right now, and we're going to return to this throughout the week. Tomorrow I'll get into, all right, great, we got the quadrants. Now, how do we analyze something with them in service of leadership? So we'll get to that. So you're getting into lines and levels. I got to start learning people's names, man. so bad.